Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we've just come back from seeing Black Panther, Wakanda Forever.
Yes.
The sequel to 2018's Black Panther, which I think we probably still think is the best Marvel film, and probably by a distance. We loved it.
I loved it.
And loads of people loved it.
Yeah.
And it felt so original, so vital, so interesting, so smart, and had great action. All the things that Marvel had been going for ages and ages going, we've got to get one that wins Best Picture, you know, and this was, I think, was it the first one that was nominated for it, maybe?
I don't remember that, but I remember being enthralled because I saw it in Stockholm, in a mall, but in the center, but in a mall-like place, and it was all full of these, you know, Scandinavians, right, all blonde and blue-eyed and tall and whatever, and you know, the film like completely captivated them, and they were like totally with it, and you know, it was just like this great feeling to see something like that on screen, and to see, you know, that audience, which for me kind of stood in, you know, for a kind of a super Aryan white audience in general, to be so with it, you know.
Yeah, the crowd here, I saw it a couple of times in this country, and the crowd was crazy for it. For one thing, it's the kind of film that fills out a cinema, you know, which most films don't. And the crowd was going nuts for it, and they were cheering and screaming, all the rest of it. And here, it was much more subdued, and the crowd was smaller, although it was still quite big.
Yes, it's, you know.
But they were, you know, whistles, moves. And so the film is doing a lot with the death of Chadwick Boseman, who was Black Panther, T'Challa. And he died at the age of, I think, 43 a couple of years ago now. And it was a huge shock. He had cancer. I think most of the world had known him because of Black Panther. He had done... In America, he played Jackie Robinson, the first black athlete to play Major League Baseball, in a film called 42, which made like $100 million, but it's really an American story. And I don't think anyone else has really seen it.
I haven't.
So I think he was known a little bit for that. But yeah, he was known for Black Panther. And I think Black Panther for a lot of people was also a bit like Iron Man, a character who you hadn't heard of. I mean, I did.
I was a fan of the comic books.
Yeah, exactly. If you had a passing interest in comics or none at all, then you'd still heard of like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, the really big ones. I'd never heard of Iron Man before the Iron Man film, and I'd never heard of Black Panther before he showed up in the Marvel universe. And as we say, it was hugely successful, and everyone loved it. And part of the question was, now that Chadwick Boseman has died and they've announced they won't be recasting T'Challa, will there still be interest? Will it still be an interesting series of movies? And I kind of had no doubt that it would be, because I think the world was such an important part of why the first one was so interesting.
Yes.
And without him in it, the world is still there.
But I think, I mean, I don't know what you felt about the film, but I was completely engrossed. I mean, you know, it's long. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
And I didn't twitch once or look at my watch once. I was completely with it the whole time. And more than that, I really think it's kind of like a radical film. Okay. You know, I think it does stuff that in any other context would seem revolutionary, really. I mean, revolutionary is probably too strong a word. But, you know, to take a male superhero show and to transcribe it all onto a grouping of women, yeah, because, you know, it's a woman's world in this new Black Panther film, with a quite an androgynous heroine, you know, kind of a lesbian couple as subsidiary characters, a mother-daughter, you know, relationship being at the heart of it. I mean, to me, that is radical. I mean, not in itself, but as a continuation of a male superhero story, right? It would be, I don't know, like kind of turning the Superman, one of the Superman movies into, you know, the relations between Superman's mother and sister and, you know, what I mean, it feels quite radical to me, really. You know, this is quite a chance that this film has taken, and it's done so incredibly well. And it's very subtle about it all, so it doesn't feel that it's having, like, you know, this feminism rammed down your throat, like, you know.
Well, we sometimes feel it's quite tokenistic in films. I mean,
exactly.
And to be fair, the lesbian relationship I only realised it was a lesbian relationship right at the end when they share a kiss.
It's true. because that's the only moment that it becomes overt, right? But these embraces between women and these looks and so on, I mean, it is like a kind of I wouldn't even say it's a feminine world, because it's not particularly feminine, but it's a woman's world.
Yeah.
That we're seeing in all its diversity. Right?
And it only occurred to me is that after a while, it only just occurred to me, oh, this is all women. After a bit, so there are three male characters of any significance, which is Winston Duke. Plays M'Baku still, and he still gets opportunities to get lots of laughs and so on. But he also has a wonderful, when it's required for M'Baku to take things seriously, he's very good at that too, and I find it quite moving actually.
Yes, I thought so too.
There's also Martin Freeman's FBI guy who is around the edges, and he's had a part to play before, and the villain in this one, which we'll get onto, who's male. But yeah, it kind of only occurred to me a while into the film that this is just all women, and some of the new characters they're bringing in are female as well, and it's just a group of women. But it doesn't have that feeling that certainly that bit in Endgame did, where it was like sisters doing it for themselves or gang. It doesn't, because it just. I suppose what occurred to me is how natural it feels. You don't question it, and the fact that I didn't even think of noticing it, if you like, until like an hour into the film, is kind of part of that, and. Part of the question is, how good is Letitia Wright at being the star now? She was a side character, she was T'Challa's sister, she does the tech and so on, and now it's very much her story. It's on her to well, the start of the story is essentially she's coping very badly with T'Challa's death. So T'Challa has been killed by an illness, which I think is not an accident that they've vaguely adapted Chadwick Boseman's real life illness into something long term that he knew was going to kill him in this film, but he didn't really tell anyone about, which is more or less how it seems to have happened in real life. She's coping very badly with it, and as a new threat emerges, how is she going to cope with new responsibility and a new part to play in Wakandan hierarchy and society?
I mean, to me, she is a supporting player. I don't see her as becoming a star outside of this role. I think she's very effective in this role. And I think part of the reason why she's so effective is because she's so well surrounded by a series of it's a wonderful ensemble. Right. To see Lupita Nyong'o, who I think is just fantastic, and actually Angela Bassett, I think is the most beautiful I've seen her. I don't know what age she is now. She must be in her 60s, right? But I've never seen her so beautifully filmed and with that white hair, and she's just so, you can't take your eyes off her, really. So the combination of all of the people that surround her means that, to me, Letitia Wright was very effective in the role. But I don't think she's got the charisma of somebody like Angela Bassett, actually. So, but I think she doesn't need more than she gives in this film.
I was actually probably a bit surprised at how good I thought she was.
Oh, good.
I mean, I really liked her in the first film, but as we said, she was a side character in that, and she was supporting, and she was mostly kind of comic relief.
Yes. She was wonderful in the first one.
Yeah.
In that.
And here, she's obviously required to do a lot of the dramatic heavy lifting, because it's about her story and her failure to cope with grief and her wanting vengeance and so on and so forth. And I bought every minute of it. I thought she was great, and I thought she was a star, actually. I couldn't take my eyes off her, sort of thing. And I really loved her, and I can see her kind of playing well with the new, whenever they do a new crossover one and it all starts to kick off into the new Avengers thing, I can see her being a big, important and charismatic part of that.
I hope you're right. I mean, I personally don't see that, but I thought she was very effective in this movie. And I also thought that she's got a unique look, because she's so androgynous looking, I mean, in some angles, really, she could be like a young boy, I thought, So, again, the combination of, her being the daughter, yes, but also her looking like that, and, yet she's not the new king, right? She doesn't challenge to become the king or the queen of Wakanda, right? So I think, for me, the whole narrative is set up in a quite a different way that I find absolutely riveting and very, very daring. I think the other thing that I want to point out is that the whole world of this film is a world of people of color. Yeah, the Martin Freeman character, I mean, I forget what the last line is, but something like, oh, you colonial, you imperial.
Yeah, a colonizer in chains.
Yes,
Yeah.
a colonizer in chains.
Now I've seen everything.
So, that's pretty much his role in that. It's a kind of a comic relief.
Yeah.
But
as it was first time round. There's that wonderful bit where they go up to see M'Baku, and he's mocking what an outsider this guy is and pretending he's going to eat him and stuff. He's like, no, we don't do that.
Yeah. I think what struck me this time is the way that they brought in a whole Latin American culture, into this world, so that it felt both inclusive and expansive, and even though, the Submariner is made to be the enemy, as he was in so many comic books, right, where he's got this rage against the surface world, the kind of dressing him up in all of this kind of what seems Mayan culture, right? I thought was just like a brilliant idea, really. And, it's like bringing Latin America into Africa through, kind of an American kind of perspective or something. It felt really innovative.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah, I wonder if it felt that there was an element to me that felt like it was just using kind of imagery and iconography of kind of the indigenous historical peoples of South America without, the thing about Black Panther, the first one, that was so remarkable and so smart is that it was really getting into the feeling of the diaspora and the fact that these people, this land had been raped and pillaged over the years, and the question of what do we do with it now, and because you had Killmonger's whole thing of wanting vengeance for it, and you had the Wakandans, or T'Challa's more reasonable, more kind of quiet thing of we're going to keep ourselves to ourselves and so on, and there was also on top of that this whole idea of Wakanda as a place is technologically advanced. It's like Tokyo in Africa. Like, what if, what could... It's like a fantasy vision of what could Africa have been had it not been raped and colonised and so on. There's nothing really about that happening with... there's nothing that clever, nothing that deep going on with this South American inflected culture, I think.
I'm not sure about that. I mean, I think... visually it's astonishing, right? The use of those costumes and the headdress, and kind of the references, to that culture and those religions and so on. What is true, and I think makes for, a fascinating kind of contrast, is that the world of Namor is a world that lacks science and learning,
Yeah, which we're told about Wakanda derives from the fact they have vibranium, and the whole point is this place also has it.
This place has the vibranium, but actually it lacks the scientific culture to do things with that vibranium, presumably other than...
Yeah, so it still has a kind of primitive culture, despite the fact that...
I mean, I thought that the whole film, for me, had a kind of a value of learning and science and experimenting. I mean, the whole kind of anti-Trump thing, right? Whereas you get the sense that the Submariner's world is a world, that's hiding. It's rich in resources.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it's got to hide them. Yeah, and it's wary of science. In fact, it wants to kill the scientists because it wants to protect itself. Yeah. And the only way of protecting itself is, to kill the science. So they don't see science as something that might benefit them as well, right? It isn't, let's get the scientists and let her help us, to develop what we can do with this, So I thought that was kind of very interesting, really.
Yeah, it is interesting. But to me, it kind of feels more accidental than deliberate, though, because I think you're right, the idea that this is a place that hasn't come up with great scientific developments from its resources, and this thing about the scientist character in particular and them wanting to kill it is interesting. But it's more about the hiding. It you know, the hiding is interesting because it sort of puts them in the position of where Wakanda had been. Wakanda had used its scientific developments to cloak itself and hide itself from the world, and it still does that. We still see the kind of invisibility shield it puts around itself, sort of thing. The thing about this Submariner world is no one's heard of them. You know, it's the first time we're hearing of them, and, you know, we've seen everything in these fucking Marvel movies, and now all of a sudden we discover a new civilization on Earth, right?
Well, I mean, the Submariner was an important comic book character as well.
Yeah, no, I don't doubt you. Yeah. So their whole thing, and it's made very explicit, is their hiding, and the fact that Wakanda has shown its vibranium to the world, even though it's still keeping it to itself, has threatened these guys now.
Yeah,
because, you know,
they're about to be discovered.
They're about to be discovered, right? So that's kind of where I thought the interest was, and there is, I suppose, there is a feeling of connection there with you know, instead of opening up about your existence and learning and so on, the response is to isolate and hide. And
not just to isolate and hide, but to completely militarize.
Yeah.
Right. You know, so I mean, for self-protection, what Namor has built is a completely military culture.
Yeah.
Right. He's saying we've been planning for this, like, for generations. Right.
Yeah.
So, and I thought that was interesting. So there's a world, like, you know, there's an ocean between them. Like, one is in Africa, the other one is clearly, like, in Latin America. They have the same resource. Yeah, kind of. One is tiny, the other one is huge. Yeah, because the other one kind of could encompass all the seas.
Yeah,
you know, and the other one not only has, you know, vibranium, but it also is clearly in control of animals like fish of various kinds. Yeah, and also with, you know, some kind of hypnotic thing that can, you know, get other people to do their bidding.
Yes, a sonic thing. I mean, to be fair, they do say, you know, it's this sonic hypnosis. There is definitely scientific development.
I'm not sure about that, because if I remember correctly, I'm not sure, but I thought, you know, one of the Submariner's powers was that. Yeah.
So this is the people's power, not a device they've created. I mean, to be fair, I wasn't clear on it.
I don't know. Right. Yeah, but I'm just saying that I think from my memory of the comic book, it was a power that the Submariner had.
Right.
Yeah.
As in the Namor character himself.
Yeah, that's right.
The main one.
Yeah.
Because certainly in the film, towards the end, when you get into that fight, when they lure them out into the sea, and they're doing it to the Wakandans, it's just like a group of the fish people in the sea doing it.
Chanting, yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
I don't know.
So
I suppose I wasn't completely clear on that. It's not a place that is 100% devoid of scientific development. They've got bombs and things, but it's still fairly rudimentary, and it is drawing a distinction between them and Wakanda.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's doing everything it's doing with them is about reflecting on Wakanda. Like, the film opens up with the Wakandans, Angela Bassett, going to the UN and, you know, saying to them, because the UN's like, you've got this vibranium, it's incredibly dangerous, we need to talk to you about it, we need you to share it with us.
We want it, yeah.
Exactly, yeah, we need it. And so the question is open right at the start about how is Wakanda going to handle international diplomacy now that people know about them. You know, and their response is, we're keeping it a secret, and it's not because it's dangerous, because you're dangerous, what you'll do with it. That's the response. But then, of course, when you get the Submariners people involved, they, as I say, are put in a position that Wakanda had been in before people knew about Wakanda. So I suppose yeah, I don't know.
I mean, the whole film begins, actually, because a young student has accidentally developed this machine that can locate vibranium.
Yeah.
Right? So that is, you know, what starts off Namor in search, or, you know, in attempting to kidnap the person who developed this resource, because it puts all of his people in danger.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, until now, they would have been quite happy to remain hidden and live their life in their world. Right? But actually, it's, you know, them being revealed to the world that puts them in danger. Right? Yeah. So, I thought that was, you know, kind of a very interesting comparison and contrast and so on. But I think it really is done in relation to science. You see, everybody in Wakanda, you know, with all the technology, all the machines, all the designing new uniforms and new this and new that, and, you know, and it's tiny, right? And then you have, you know, everything coming from the Submariners world is a hatred of that science. And I thought that what was interesting, that was kind of largely completely absent from this film, but that was such a staple of the comic books, is that the reason why the Submariner hates the surface world is because they keep polluting it, right? Yeah. So all the kind of richness of the surface world is actually at the expense of the oceans. They dump everything on the sea, either dumping all this garbage on his people.
Yeah.
And that's why he seeks vengeance. Whereas this film has a more...
Well, he talked about their people having originally been driven into the sea because of the conquistadors taking over their lands.
That's right.
So it's a colonization thing, and then they made a potion out of this plant that gave them the ability, it basically turned them into fish people of a sort, and they were able to live in the sea because of that.
Yeah.
And he in particular took on some particular special mutations, so he's lived for hundreds of years and can breathe on land, but he's different, he's special.
Yes.
The others are just... Well, they're Aquaman people, right? They're Atlanteans, essentially. I mean, this is the Marvel sort of version of Aquaman.
Yes.
In a sense. Although Aquaman, interestingly, did have the whole pollution angle.
Yes.
As I recall, which, as you say, is absent here.
Yeah.
I suppose that is... I suppose that is something that, again, draws a closer parallel to Wakanda. Or to Africa in general. The idea of having been colonised and stolen from and so on. Whereas, and certainly you can look at, if they had included the idea of the seas being polluted so that the surface could develop, you could definitely see, like, it's talking about externalities, right? The externality of the surface doing extremely well is that the seas do very badly, and the externality of the West developing is at the expense of Africa, essentially. Stolen from but it doesn't do that. It doesn't, I think it would
suggest that.
Well, it does through the colonisation aspect, but it would be doing so more and more concretely, I think, if it said, this world has polluted us in the way that they stole from you. You know what I mean?
Yes, but, I mean, instead they do it through colonialism, because, the reason why Wakanda is hidden was actually because of British colonialism in Africa, enslaving people and conquering them and so on. Yeah, that's kind of why they hid. Right, so that is a shared history in different ways and with different results. So, I mean, I think that, for a film that is kind of like an action spectacle, I think it looks smashing. I think it moves beautifully. And yet it also has all of these things, including, the radical development of turning a male hero story into a kind of a woman's collective, with a lead character, but nonetheless a female ensemble.
Yeah.
I thought, I think it's amazing.
You said right at the start, at 2 hours and 40 minutes, it didn't lose you.
It didn't.
I thought it started slowly. I think to me it was taking a while to pick up, and it was once the scientist character got to Wakanda, I think that's around, or once they went to retrieve her at the university, that's when things started to get going for me. And to be fair, from then on it didn't lose me, but it had taken a while to get going, I thought.
I think you're right in that a lot of time is spent showing you that the Black Panther has died, right? And what happened as a result of that. I mean, you do need a period of transition because, certainly the character was not expected to die, right? So, from the last film to this one, you have to account for the change.
Yeah.
But I thought it was necessary, and I thought it was well done. I thought it was also tasteful in the sense that you could imagine how schmaltzy,
Yeah, I kind of was thinking... So, like I said, it's doing a lot with the death of Chadwick Boseman. And I don't want to sound callous, but, I think I felt it slightly overdid it. Although, I did also think about when Iron Man dies at the end of Endgame, and what an elaborate production of grief that was. And this isn't doing
really
that.
Phony.
This isn't doing that, and obviously it is dealing with the real death of a real actor as opposed to the death of a character. It incorporates the death of the character into the film, obviously. But I think you're right. It is more tasteful than that, certainly. I did still think, it goes back to the kind of death of T'Challa at the end to just kind of round it off. So it starts off with his death, and the Marvel logos that come up, which normally has all the different characters, and it's got like pages of script for various characters say it's all T'Challa now. So it's all images of the Black Panther, and the Marvel logo is not backgrounded by red, it's backgrounded by purple. That's the Black Panther's colour. And it's all silent as well. It doesn't have the Marvel theme over the top of it. And it's like you can hear a pin drop in the audience. Everyone is sort of... It did feel a little bit like... Well, I was going to say, to me, it did it so much, it felt like inviting yourself to someone else's funeral, in a way. I was like, this is a bit heavy, a bit... Not heavy, but a bit much. But then maybe it's just fair that they do that because he was important to the film and stuff. It did make me think it is overplaying it a bit. And when it goes back to T'Challa at the end, when she finally sits on the beach and has a like Lion King sort of imaging sort of him, and again it's done to pure silence. I thought, haven't we seen this once already? And I know it's for the character's sake.
No, there I agree with you. I mean, I thought the beginning to me was great and necessary, and very well done. I thought the end was a bit over egging the pudding.
Okay.
And I do think actually that it would have been much more effective had all of that thing at the end been with the mother, with the Angela Bassett character, instead of with T'Challa.
On the ancestral plane, had she seen her mother there?
That's
Whereas,
right.
in fact, she'd seen her for a split second a bit before when she was about to kill the villain, and it hadn't had the emotional impact it probably should have. Because the whole thing when she first goes to the ancestral plane, Shuri, is she sees Killmonger. She's like, why? My family's abandoned me. I've got to see this guy who is the villain, And because that reflects her quest for vengeance and her anger inside. And so when she does see Angela Bassett, because, spoilers, Angela Bassett
Mm.
dies during the course of this film, it should have been very, very impactful. It didn't...
Well, I think actually, she's given short shrift, and I do think that the ending was a bit of a missed opportunity, because I think it should have been all about the mother. Because at the heart of this film is a whole mother-daughter relationship. It is all about mothers and their children, actually.
Yeah.
Both the Submariner's mother, and Angela Bassett, and then, the Lupita Nyong'o character. So like there's this whole theme of motherhood, that's kind of being deployed. So the emotional resonance at the end should have been this reconciliation with the mother.
Yeah, absolutely right.
So I think, that was a missed opportunity and a sop, really, because the homage had already been paid to the character and the actor at the beginning.
Yeah.
So this would have been a good moment to set up something, to have a kind of emotional closure about this particular narrative, and to help set up something for the future, which they kind of do with the child.
Yeah. And to be fair, the character had also... It was clear throughout the film that the character of Shuri had been coping badly with T'Challa's death. And so the idea that this is where she finally has reconciliation with his death at the end does make sense. It's not completely out of the blue that they do all this ancestral plane stuff with T'Challa there. But I think you're right, it's more fitting. It would have been more fitting had it been a reconciliation of the mother story.
Because also there's that scene at the beginning where Tsuri doesn't believe in the hocus pocus and so on. She's with the mother and she leaves her and so on. So actually, to go back, after having taken the flower and becoming the Black Panther, and having the ceremony about and with her mother, it would have taken the film a notch up, I think.
Yeah. I thought it was a film that essentially showed how difficult international diplomacy is, because and international diplomacy is really a theme in it. It's not like me just being kooky or trying to think on phone. It's like it starts off, as I say, at the UN, and how you're going to handle other countries, and then this whole new nation is brought into it, and how we're going to handle them. But the thing is that this kind of rush to war with this new nation. Well, it doesn't happen extremely quickly, but it happens based on kind of partial information and things. So they want certain things from Wakanda. They want Wakanda essentially to take responsibility for telling the world about vibranium, which is now threatening them. But of course the Wakandans are going, who the hell are you? This has come very quickly. And all I was thinking throughout a lot of this is, like, if you just sit down and talk about this for a while, right, you can actually straighten some of this out. But of course what happens is they go and try and get this scientist, and the Submariner people come and stop them. They take the scientist and Shuri hostage, essentially, take them to their underwater kingdom. And because there's partial information on both sides, so you've got Shuri learning about this place and starting to develop empathy for it, as the villain actually says at one point. She's starting to develop empathy for us. you've got the Queen on the surface. Angela Bassett is still alive at this point, who has no priority other than getting her daughter back, and the fact that she then is, sending someone to go and get the daughter back is going to end up threatening the potential diplomacy that is developing between Shuri and this guy. So and I'm thinking, like, what a tragedy it is that they can't just, like, calm down for a second, but you also understand why they can't, and why it happens so quickly, and why this war develops. And then actually when the war is happening, part of me is thinking, I actually feel bad for all these people who are fighting in this war and dying in it as we're watching, because they really don't have to be. And I was surprised, and really pleasantly surprised, that the eventual confrontation between Shuri and the villain, and I should just get his name, what was it? Namor, played by Tenochtitlan Mejia. I was really pleasantly surprised that the final confrontation between them didn't end with Namor dying, but it ended with a truce.
Sure.
And coming back and saying the war is over now, we have this, it might be shaky, but it's an alliance of sorts right now, and we can call off the fight. You don't see that at the end of these films at all, ever. No. You never see a peace break out.
No, I thought that was great. I thought that was brilliant. And I thought it also leaves an opportunity to have a standalone Submariner film.
Although he is still definitely being cast as a villain, because that mural that he's painting at the end, and is it his wife who comes and sees him, whoever it is, who says, I wanted to fight together, or something like that. And he explains to her, they're going to rely on us now. And what's unspoken, at least as far as I saw it, was, when they rely on us, we will say no. That's what I thought.
Well, no, what I thought was when they call on us, we'll take that as an opportunity to kill the Cypher's world.
Well, yeah, okay, same sort of thing, right?
So,
but he's still essentially being given this long-term villain role, is what it comes across to me as.
Well, but the thing about the Submariner is that he was always like an anti-hero, right? And the thing is that he becomes kind of a hero because you understand where he's coming from.
Yeah, you definitely do here as well. It was interesting that you definitely had the same thing with Killmonger in the first one. He's part of a line of villains that you definitely see their point.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the fun things that Hollywood does, is it gives you a villain who really has a point, and it very very often happens actually with the environment. I think for me the classic example was Kingsman. In the first Kingsman film, the Samuel L. Jackson character was essentially an environmentalist, but of course he goes about achieving or trying to achieve his environmental goals by putting bombs in everyone's head. And it's like, so like it casts someone who really has the right idea in the villain role, and you do get the feeling of like the military industrial complex like making these films.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
To try and shape public opinion about the environment.
Yes.
I definitely think, these people that have been throwing soup on paintings in galleries, stop oil people. Like the more they do it, the more I think they're being paid by big oil.
Oh,
do you know what I mean? It's so easy to because everyone is against. Everyone looks at these people throwing soup on paintings, going, "You fucking idiots."
Well, I don't know.
It's so easy to shape public opinion about crazy environmentalists that way. Anyway,
to go back to Namor and the Submariner, I think there are real possibilities of developing a standalone film with him, because you understand his rage and where he's coming from, and and then of course there are potential for character development, and it would be absolutely fantastic to have and this is another radical departure from the film, to kind of embody, imagine, symbolize this character now as a Mexican, or certainly a Latin American superhero, which
I believe the actor is of indigenous descent.
Well, with a name like Tenoch, I'm not surprised.
Right. I don't know the name.
Well, there's a whole thing in Y Tu Mamá También about the names of the characters, right? Okay. And basically saying that Tenoch, our name. Well, the Tenoch is a name. I forget actually now what the argument is, but anyway, it's an indigenous Mexican name. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, anyway, it would be great to have a Latin American superhero, because the Submariner was always kind of pictured as like, super white.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, with dark hair, but blue eyes and like this muscular white build, yeah.
Right.
So certainly nothing Latin American about him. So I think this would be brilliant if that was part of the development, and I think it's also kind of part of the daring of this film that it cast it in that way.
He certainly seems set to return in some form or other. The film the series isn't going to leave him alone, and that's interesting because over the last few Marvel films, essentially, I've really been starting to feel the sense of diminishing returns. That most of the characters who I learned to be interested in the first 10 years are now gone, or certainly have kind of limited involvement. It seems to be, so well. Who we got left? We've got Doctor Strange, who is still fun. I love. We've got Spider-Man, obviously, now that Spider-Man is actually involved because of the deal with Sony, he's super important, and he's probably going to be effectively the main one. And they always were writing him as kind of poised to be the new Iron Man, or take over from Iron Man's role, sort of thing. And Black Panther, and then of course the thing about Chadwick Boseman dying, and how would that continue? And I'm glad that this kind of is successful. It was financially successful, and I think the film is good.
Yeah.
And it definitely shows that there's a future still in the Wakanda kind of part of.
I think it's better than good. I think it's the best Marvel film since the original Black Panther.
I think you're probably right about that. So the question is, all the other ones, all the new ones that they're trying to introduce, the Eternals. I had no interest in and had a very bad time in that film. Shang-Chi we liked, and it was quite promising. I think we liked it.
Yeah.
There's definitely promise there. So I guess the question is can it develop a new set of interesting characters? Because the thing was, as I say, the first time I wasn't a comic book guy. I'm not a comic book guy, and Iron Man comes out in 2008. You're going, who the fuck is Iron Man? And then it turns out to be really remarkably good. And, they were shaky here and there. I didn't like the Thors. Incredible Hulk they recast, which is unusual for Marvel to have done, because they didn't do that with anyone else. But Edward Norton was not successful as the Hulk. But, ultimately they built something really successful, and they built characters who, like I said, you learn to love if you hadn't known about them before, like I did. Question is, can they do it a second time?
Well, I think they've done it with this film. So
Yeah, they have. She really makes sense as a new Black Panther.
So it's a film that I highly recommend. I do think it is quite a daring departure for the Marvel series, and one that I really welcome. So thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Audible, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. It's good. It means that I'm still interested in seeing the next Marvel film, which, because it's getting to the point where you're going, I can't be, I'm not sure about this anymore. But
yes, I was pleasantly surprised, I must say,
Oh, were you? So you weren't expecting so much from it?
No, well, I mean, I kind of... I didn't have any... I wasn't anti-whatever. I didn't go in with a chip on my shoulder about anything. But I also wouldn't have been surprised if it was a disaster, because, the leading protagonist is dead. So, it could go anywhere, right?
Yeah. So. No, it's interesting. I kind of wasn't worried about that at all. I feel like I assumed that Marvel has an awful lot of care for its characters, I think. Even if some of it had to learn to care for, like the whole thing about Black Widow only getting her own standalone movie after she was dead. It was took a while. But it cares for its characters to the point where, in Endgame, when, as I say, Iron Man died, it cared too much. And it was really selling the schmaltz. But you didn't feel like it was... you felt like if they had somehow fucked this up, everyone involved would never work in Hollywood again. It's so important that they got this right.
Sure.
So I kind of didn't have a
Sure,
worry
but
that it would.
I mean, disasters happen in Hollywood filming. I mean, it's Hollywood. Things can and do go wrong all the time, and sometimes when you think it's the surest bet goes wrong.
That's true.
So
I suppose also because I did know it was Ryan Coogler directing still, and he directed the first one.
Sure.
And so the idea that it's still the group of people who'd made that first one.
Yeah.
Were in charge of memorialising the character and the actor. I think was part of what's kind of reassuring about that.
Yeah, the memorialising is not something that I ever doubted. It's the going forward bit.
Oh right, okay, yeah, okay.
I was concerned by.
No, that's fair enough. Yeah, no, I was talking about the dealing with the death as opposed to what comes next. But yeah, fair enough.